So hello and welcome back to another episode of this walkthrough and setup guide. And today we're going to be looking at the Bentley Continental, and the community event is still running. We've still got 12 hours left. Usually I wouldn't jump the gun and I'd record this after the event, but I think I've just about got as much out of the car as I'm going to get. So I've decided to do this with my current time being 41.898, 1 minute 41.898. An amazing effort by, I think it's EuskoSati and THR as well, Moo007, whatever his name is. And everyone else that's taken part, all these low 42 times, really great times. But I think myself, obviously the two other guys, and I think there's two, maybe three more people on PC that managed to break into the 41s. But I'll explain as I go along through the drive round the lap, but I really did struggle exiting on the last corner, and I was losing nearly 5/10 just on the last corner alone, so I just don't know where the right line is for that corner, but Sati definitely found the right line through that corner. So yeah, let's get into the tune. Lots to talk about and lots to have a look at. So here we are, just taking a look at the setup. Running soft tyres. There has been some talk that a couple of guys ran the hard tyre, but I really do think the soft tyre was the only option. Just for one flying lap, there's no point doing multiple laps. The soft tyre just gets too hot and you do really just start to lose the grip. But I think if you could manage to keep the tyre pressures around 24 throughout the whole run, it'd probably be the sweet spot of the soft tyre. Slightly harder on the front just to get that turning response. It doesn't really amount to any more straight line speed, and slightly softer at the rear just to try and differentiate between having a softer tyre on the rear to provide a little bit more grip. The brake pressure was quite important. I did have this at 100, but I'll talk through one of the areas where it just seemed to be too much pressure, just causing the rear end to step out a little bit. It just seemed too eager on the brake pedal. Brake balance again is just to try and turn the car. I did try this around the 58, but settled on the 60. But we're still trying to not make the car turn too much in the braking zones. But one thing is for sure, on the drive around this circuit, you really do need to attack them braking zones. Brake ducts, obviously we're just trying to keep the temperature down through the brake ducts whilst also reducing the amount of drag that's caused by the brake ducts being opened too far. Obviously most of the braking's being done by the front, so obviously we're going to increase a little bit more of the front end. The downforce, this was a really big issue really. I was getting really good runs. You definitely got to have two on the front, maximum on the front. Just with the amount the car seems to understeer. But the rear, I'd swapped between 7 and 8 on various occasions, still getting really good runs out of both. So you could opt for either really. The only downside was the exiting on that last corner, and it does affect a tiny amount the back straight or the start finish straight, the speed that you can get down there. But I didn't see it as a massive factor. So yeah, 7 or 8 works fine. Moving to suspension, I did try deselecting symmetrical here and running a slightly different setup on the right hand side of the car just because of the predominant right hand bends. Obviously lowering the camber angle would give you much more grip on the one side of the car, but it would be only beneficial really if there wasn't so many left hand turns that were quite important, like this one in the background. So yeah, having to run maximum cambers really is about getting as much grip as possible. Ride height, obviously we're going to go as low as we can possibly get the car, so that's as low as possible both front and rear. Spring rates, it really is a case of going for the hardest suspension on this one, definitely on the front, just to try and get some response out of the turning. Again, with camber at the rear as maximum it goes. The only difference here I did try was camber at 3.8 on the front, but eventually I ended up back at the 4, and ride height's as low as it goes again at the rear. But I did just take this down 3 notches just to try and get some more rear grip. Obviously, it's such a fine balance between setting this car up. You sort of take from the front and you add to the rear, and you add from the rear to take from the front in so many different areas through the setup. And it really is a really fine balancing act. Steering ratio, again, obviously I'm using the McLaren wheel, so a really tight steering ratio. And there are maybe two quite tight corners on this circuit. Again, the one in the background, but to try and get around these without locking the wheel out and having to let go of the wheel and spin the wheel again, obviously we select a lower steering ratio. The toe angle, again, just trying to get some turning response. 2 clicks on this one. You would never click the other way. Yeah, you would never really have positive toe at the front, always negative toe. So just 2 clicks this way. And the anti-roll bar, again, I had this set quite stiff initially, going up to around 150, and just eventually trying to bring this down to try and combat the mid-corner understeer again and again, really. The rear, I did have this at 0, but just one thing that is worth trying to do when you're looking at your rear toe angle is to just sit on the start-finish straight or any long straight, get the revs right the way up as maximum as you can, and just drop it into gear and just set off. And if you get any sort of movement on the wheel that's pulling you either left or right, I'd start to add maybe a click on the rear. On the positive at the rear, you wouldn't really go negative, so positive angle on the rear. And just keep doing this. Some cars are terrible for torque steering, which means like you're pulling the car to one side. So if you ever get this happening on a straight, especially on a straight, you want to start adding a few clicks of the toe angle at the rear. So anti-roll bar, just softening this out slightly to try and improve rear grip, any sort of mid-corner oversteer. And moving to the dampers, I've got to hold my hands up on this one. I ended up having a little look at Sati's setup. Because he was exiting that final corner with so much acceleration, I just really thought, is it something I'm doing wrong in the damper section? Is the car just bouncing a little bit? And I think I had a much softer, that was at 225. So I think I was all the way down at about around this area where I was setting mine up. So I had a much softer front end. But if you actually look at our suspension, we've got the front set quite stiff. So he was bang on with going with a stiffer setup through the front. But I think he has this set all the way up here. I like to keep it. Obviously, we all know that the rebound number should be a lot higher. It should be higher than the bump. But I just found it was maybe too high. You could probably add that up to around there, and maybe just bumping those up a little bit like that. But it ran quite well with how I had that set like that. The transition is quite a slow transition. It will go up quite a bit further, and it will come down a bit further. So leading it still a little bit more to a higher end Newton load on the transition. Again at the rear, I mean, this is a massive step for me. I wouldn't usually set this up with such a big incremental step. I would usually say have this around about that sort of area. But Sati ended up setting this much higher, but I was really struggling with that back straight, getting off that last corner. So I just really thought it must be down to the dampers, but it certainly did improve my time to maybe three or 4 tenths on the exit of that last corner. So thanks very much for that, Sati. Definitely helped me out there, and something I'll look at further when I'm setting the car up in future, to have such a big difference between these two. And again on the fast bump. So running a softer transition on the rear, so this isn't going to be as fast, the transition from slow to fast. The higher the number on here, the slower the transition. I can't quite remember where that was actually, but moving on to the next one. The boost pressure, obviously we're going to keep this at 100, no air restrictions, and the radiator is closed. We're only going to do 1 lap. The engine braking, I couldn't quite manage to do the engine braking as much. I think Sati has this down at 0, but for me it's just too much engine braking and causes too much locking of the rear wheels. I quite like how the car handles with the engine braking on 4, to be honest, but really to get the car stopped really nice and quickly, just getting that additional engine braking. The gear ratios, we can't do anything with the final drive, and we can't really do anything with either gear as well, because it just removes a gear. So obviously if you change this way, it just creates that to be exactly the same gear ratio as first gear, and conversely if you go the other way, you would literally be putting second gear as third gear, so there's no point adjusting any of those. If you were looking at actually using the traction control and keeping this enabled through the lap, I recommend around 18 to 20 on the traction control. I think the car actually handles better if you turn the traction control off during the event itself. But for anyone that can't really run without traction control, I'd say around 18 to 20 is a good number to look at. Didn't really adjust the ABS strength too much, did try it around the 60 mark, but ended up back at 75. I don't think there's much in it really. And the differential, another new step that I thought Sati introduced on this one was to include the viscous LSD, which is almost like adding, I think it's like a liquid element into the differential itself, whereby the higher the Newton meter load through the system itself increases the viscosity, I guess, of the liquid inside, making it tougher to turn. But this is supposed to aid in traction off a corner during acceleration, and I think I noticed it quite a lot, to be honest, especially the corner in the background. Accelerating off that turn really does help. But I think this number works quite happily around from around 250 upwards to the 500. I don't think there's a huge difference, but I think it's certainly worth having the viscous lock. The power ramp, I did try this around 75, 70 and all the way down to the 60, settling on 60. One of the corners I mentioned, the differential, where it really did help. Yeah, just to get the power down and get the car turned. I still think having this around the 60 mark just helps the car rotate a little bit more and get on the power nice and early. Same with the coast ramp. Because we're using so much engine braking, it sort of forces the car to oversteer under braking. So by lowering the coast ramp, you're sort of trying to induce some understeer. The lower it goes, which is only down to 20, I think that was too much. You're getting too little oversteer. So just increase that to there. Did try it with six on the clutches, but I think it was a bit too vicious. Just moved it back down to 4 and keeping the preload at around 100. Again, I did try this a little bit lower down, just try and not rotate too much. Again, that was through another corner. Hopefully I'll mention it on the drive around the lap. where the preload actually, you sort of off the throttle for a little section. And that's the tune, guys. Let's have a drive around this lap. So here we go, just slow this down again. This corner is such an important corner on the build up to the lap. You really need to take this flat out. So just trying to accelerate all the way down the start finish straight, and with as little reduction in speed as possible, really. Taking it all the way to the red line. And we're going to be right the way up into 6th gear when we start hitting this braking zone. And I'll slow down nicely for it. We're just going to drop back a tiny bit here. And obviously, I'll not reiterate this more than I am going to do now, but stay off the curbs because it really doesn't help this car at all. So we can see just ahead of us there on the left hand side, there's a little white line. Well, we're going to try and brake almost about a car's width from that white line. It might seem like I'm braking a lot later during the replay, but it's probably like a lack of misjudgment. Maybe around this section here, you want to be really heavy on the brake pedal. We're all the way up in 6th gear. So right at this point here, we're going to drop 2 gears down to 4th gear and then be accelerating hard. We're not accelerating, sorry. We're going to be still braking, but we've only dropped 2 gears. And then just as we get a little bit closer to the corner, we're going to eventually drop into 3rd gear. And hopefully this is going to, hopefully this is going to slightly get the car to turn too much. Like we're going to have an oversteer moment, which allows us just to really get close to this curb here and really mount the curb, sort of sliding the car a little bit in 3rd gear. And then we're going to be max full on the power as soon as we can get on the power. And once again, I'm going to reiterate this no more than I am going to do right now. You need to be on the power before you think you need to be on the power, and that is literally everywhere around this circuit. You want to be back on that power and back at full throttle as soon as possible. So running the car out as wide as it's going to go, right the way out to the curb. If you can stay off the curb, stay off the curb, but sometimes it's quite hard to do. And you'll notice I really whip the wheel back across to try and keep straight. It's a little bit of a technique, I suppose. Just try and get the car to settle itself. So then coming round, and just as we hit this apex of the corner, I'm going to drop back into 4th gear, take as much of that curb as you can, and running all the way out wide onto the left hand side. Do not touch the curb or you're going to spin during the braking phase. But just again, as we hit that white line on the left hand side, I've just gone a tiny bit past it. But right there, we're going to drop 2 gears, really heavy on the brake, and you're going to have to listen out for the engine note here, because if you change too early, you'll end up locking the rear wheels because we've got so much engine braking going on. And then you're going to drop quickly down to the last 1st gear and really hugging this apex. Listen to the engine, make sure you're not going to accelerate before you've got traction. And then we're going to be maximum full power as soon as possible in 1st gear, all the way up, and taking a sort of sweeping line across here. Try not to take too much of this curb again, and back on full power all the way out here. Run it as wide as you can, up to 3rd. Fourth gear, and then eventually into 5th gear, and then again just on this, try and brake in time, come back a touch. So yeah, just on the left hand side, this is my braking zone. The first cone, I'm going to try and run just past the first cone, and then I'm going to brake massively, anchoring on from 5th gear, two knocks down straight away, braking really hard in a straight line, and then I'm going to start to turn in, drop into 2nd gear, and then right on the apex drop into 3rd gear and really turning the car. And if you remember from the last video, I'm sort of coming off the pedal nice and gently on the brake pedal, and then onto the accelerator as much as you can really, and then up to full power as soon as possible to accelerate up this hill. 4th, and then eventually into 5th. And then just as we sort of come in around here, I'm going to drop it, start to turn it in, and then into 3rd gear and take as much of this curb. You can run right onto the yellow part of the sausage curb, and then braking hard again down to 2nd, don't touch the curb again, you'll spin, and then down to 2nd and try and hold 2nd gear and come up and take as much of this yellow curb again as you can, and then as hard on that accelerator as soon as possible. Accelerating hard up and over the ridge. Coming up to another very key point of the lap, and I tried many different lines into here, and this is where the brake pressure I thought was too much on 100. It was just turning the car too much. Again with the preload, that's why I didn't have it around 60. It wasn't allowing the car to turn enough. So a fine balancing act. But as you come up here, you're flying up in 4th gear, and just as we come over the brow of this hill, we're going to brake before we start. The weight of the car starts to shift. So from 4th gear, we're going to have one knock down to 3rd gear, we're braking hard, and then it's not going to be like a down down, it's going to be like a down down. So there's a little pause between the gear shifts, and then we're going to swap into 2nd gear, and it's going to really still on the brake pedal, and it's going to sort of try and get the car to spin. And as soon as the car's turned, we're looking to accelerate as soon as possible. It's so important to be early on the acceleration here. And then we're going to be up into 2nd gear, taking as much of that curb as you can, but don't go too much over the yellow because you'll get a time penalty. Track limits. Running out wide, and you'll see I'm twitching all over the place on my replay, trying to get the car steadied again. So up into 3rd gear, eventually into 4th gear, and then not running too wide again, not taking too much curb, and sort of around this area we're going to drop down to 3rd, down to 2nd, and then again on the apex just into 1st gear and accelerating as fast as you can, running the car out wide, into 2nd gear. I do go into 3rd gear and then just back into 2nd gear, but heavy on the brake pedal. The car's twitching all over the place here, but as soon as you can, again, you want to be accelerating before you think you can accelerate here. Sati does this so well, and you can see it on the replay how much more speed he gets out of this turn. It really does take about 3 to 4 tenths off my lap time, and I just can't nail this corner. It really has been a pain in the arse, to be honest. So then, as soon as you can, 2nd, 3rd, just twitching everywhere, 4th gear, and again another tough decision here is where to turn in. but turning in full whack power, you might have a little lift and then back on the power. And I changed to fourth gear. You sort of just trying to find the grip all the way here. I think if you keep a perfect angle on the wheel, you just tend to scrub speed. So it's just a technique I have, just turning the wheel a little bit. And then you're going to be blasting down here with fourth, up into fifth gear. I'm just trying to run all the way to the line, maxing out. And you'll be sort of maxing out in fifth gear around this part here. And again, it's whether to shift to sixth or whether just to stay in fifth. It's your decision, really. Thanks for watching once again, guys. Hope you enjoyed the new finish on the wheel. Hopefully I'll be looking at doing another video on this, showing you how I've recreated the wheel. Just to get rid of that rubber, add a little bit more comfort in this area of the wheel as well. And thanks for watching. Like and hit that subscribe button, guys. I keep plugging on about it, but just trying to get that subscriber base up and get some more viewers. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, ciao for now.